My name is Reverend Christopher Eshelman, and I'm blessed to serve as the pastor at Pretty Prairie and here at Murdock United Methodist Church. After some technical problems last week, I decided to try and shoot here at Murdock again this morning. And just as I got everything set up, the gentleman we pay to mow our lawn showed up. You can probably hear him in the background. And at first I thought, I'll just wait. It shouldn't take him long. And my mind turned to one of my favorite labyrinths to walk. It's in downtown Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's in the courtyard of the Cathedral of St. Francis. It's laid in stone, and they have sculptures and a garden around it. And it's right by a main street, and there are buses and taxis and cars honking and pedestrians. And in the courtyard itself, because there are sculptures and beautiful trees, it's a great place to take family photos. And people don't realize the labyrinth is there, and so you're walking and people walk right across it. And at first I thought, I can't walk here. I need it to be quiet and special and holy. And like I said, it's one of my favorite labyrinths in the world because our journey gets interrupted. There are distractions and disappointments. And yet we are called to walk the journey of faith, to center ourselves in prayer in the midst of regular life. Right now, we are distracted and physically distanced. Our worlds have been greatly disrupted. It would be much easier for me if there were people in these pews and we were together. It's a lot more work to record and edit and post a worship service than it is to just preach on Sunday morning. And yet, we are called to walk our path, to listen for God's voice, to center ourselves in worship, even in the midst of these distractions. I've been reading a book recently called Take the Next Right Step. And this morning, from Murdock and some other places, I want to share some insights I've gotten from that and from the resurrection stories that I've been focusing on the last few weeks. I hope you have as well. I invite you to find a Bible and turn to John chapter 20. We're going to focus on a few verses from that experience that Mary and the disciples have that morning. Blessings on your journey, Murdock or Pretty Prairie or wherever it is that your next right step has taken you this morning. John chapter 20, starting with the 11th verse. But Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she was crying, she stooped to look into the tomb. She saw two angels in white sitting where Jesus' body had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "Because they've taken away my Lord," she told them, "and I don't know where they put him." Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not recognize that it was Jesus. "Woman," Jesus said to her, "why are you crying? Who is it that you are seeking?" Supposing he was the gardener, she replied, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you put him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. "Don't cling to me," Jesus told her, "since I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and tell them that I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them what he had said to her. I'm standing outside at Murdock United Methodist Church near the Carillon. One of the things that we are working on doing right now is creating a walking path where we and our neighbors might come to exercise and to pray. The disruption of our lives has slowed those plans down a bit, but the vision is that we would create a space out here on the lawn. We'd have some posts at either end of this sidewalk and at some different places along the grounds where we might have a box with prayer suggestions and exercise suggestions, just creating a space off the streets, off the roads where people might quiet themselves, center themselves, walk and notice. Notice the difference in the path, the way the sunlight plays through the leaves of the trees, the way the wind blows. Our journey is not always straightforward. Mary goes to the tomb that morning expecting to anoint a body. The angel tells her that Jesus is not there. He is risen, just as he said. But she can't quite take in what that means yet. Resurrection disrupts our world. Resurrection doesn't just set everything back to the way it was. Mary doesn't recognize Jesus. Not until Jesus speaks her name does she realize. Resurrection doesn't just take us back to where we were. Resurrection invites us to take the next step, to see things differently, to dream and hope and recognize that everything we have dreamt and hoped for is but a pale hint of what is to come. As you continue to read in John 20, Jesus appears in a locked room to the disciples. Thomas isn't there. We don't know why. Maybe he's afraid and hiding. Maybe he's been the only one with the courage to go out and get the things that the group needs. But for whatever reason, he's not there. Jesus appears behind locked doors. The physical restraints no longer constrain him. They don't limit him. He is no longer confined to one particular place or time, but he is with them. And he still bears the wounds. He shows them the wounds, the brokenness, the pain, the holes from the nails. And he breathes on them. He says, "Receive the Holy Spirit." A week later, Thomas is back with them. And Jesus appears again. And before anyone can say anything, Jesus says to Thomas, "Put your fingers here. Touch the wounds." Thomas, despite being known as the doubter, confesses. It doesn't tell us if he actually touches the wounds or not. The next line is, "My Lord and my God." Thomas takes the next step. He confesses faith. He worships. Mary took the next step. She recognizes on hearing her name, and she understands that she has a purpose to go and to tell, to take the next step on her journey. Neither of them see everything that will now happen. Jesus doesn't give them a 5-step plan or exactly everything that will come down in the next week or month or year. Jesus is with them, calls them by name, and invites them to journey with him. We are given the faith of Christ. Not merely faith in Christ, not something we can figure out or understand in our head, but we are invited to participate in the faith of Christ. To journey with Christ through this world, through its distractions and disappointments and confusion, to be the hands and feet. We can't do everything, but we can do something. Here in Murdock, we have discerned that a walking path on this land might be a good next step. It might be a way to serve our neighbors, to create some space where people might exercise and pray, to demonstrate life outside of the building, to make use of the resources and the abundance that we do have, instead of worrying about what we don't have. It's beautiful here. The people who live in Murdock, the people who live in Pretty Prairie, have chosen these places on purpose. And I believe that God has a purpose for these places, for each of us, for our journey. One of the traditions at our sister church in Pretty Prairie is that over the summer we invite local youth. Some of them are affiliated with our church, some are not, but they've been involved in the music program at USD 311, and our choir director, Michel Gumble Bradley, creates space that they might come and share their musical talents with us. Since school is not meeting in person, we decided we would start that early this year, and Michelle has been working with students to record their state contest singing and music, and we have the opportunity to share some of that with you. We begin today with Bailey Young and a wonderful song called The Violet.
Down in the green and shady bed, a modest violet grew. Its stalk was bent, it hung its head, as if to hide from view, as if to hide from view. And yet it was a lovely flower, its colors bright and fair. It might have graced a
The words to the song Bailey sung are by Mark Patterson. Down in the green and shady bed, a modest violet grew. Its stalk was bent, it hung its head, as if to hide from view. But yet it was a lovely flower, its colors bright and fair. It might have graced a rosy bower, instead of hiding there. Yet there it was, content to bloom, in modest tints arrayed, and there it spread its sweet perfume, within the silent shade. Then let me to the valley grow, this pretty flower to see, that I may also learn to grow in sweet humility. Each of us has a journey. I believe our task is to carry and share the light of hope and grace and love that Christ has given us, to share it with others, to rejoice when our paths intersect, to share that light, to illuminate next steps. If our journeys align and go the same way, that is a joy. If our journeys take us in different directions, if one of our paths is turning, that too can be a joy. We can wish each other well. We can offer blessings. Earlier in John, in chapter 10, Jesus says to his disciples that he is the good shepherd, that his sheep hear his voice. And then he tells them that he has other flocks besides these, and that they too hear his voice. Too often I think we get stuck in false binaries. We think it has to be this or that. I believe Jesus tells us that our journeys are much more complex and diverse than that. Mary, the disciples, Thomas, who was absent, who says he won't believe unless he touches the wounds, and then has that prayer answered. Those who believe without seeing. Those who had hoped and were walking sadly on the road to Emmaus, when Jesus makes himself known. Next week, I invite you to have made some preparations for our worship service. We're going to share Holy Communion in the way that Great Plains Bishop Signs has authorized us to do. You can certainly use bread and grape juice if you have it, but I'm encouraging you to have something very simple. Some water, a saltine cracker for each person, maybe a favorite cloth of some sort, something that reminds you of a loved one. And have that prepared before you turn into worship next week. And with the story of the road to Emmaus, I will lead us through a very special time of Holy Communion, of recognizing Jesus in our midst in unexpected ways and unexpected places. I'm glad that you have joined me on this walk today, and I'm glad that our paths have crossed, that we might journey together for a while. Resurrection changes us. Resurrection invites us to bloom where we are, to take the next step, to share beauty as we have been given it. Resurrection is not about knowing everything or displaying our own grandeur. It's about growing in God's love and grace. It's about seeing God's abundance around us. It's about being who we are created to be, transformed, renewed, restored by the faith of Christ, the grace of Christ, the love of Christ. We don't have to see the whole path. We don't have to have it all figured out. We simply have to take the next right step. Blessings on your journey.